Brightspace is the LMS that helps you reach every learner. It makes teaching and learning easier by letting you focus on what's most important, your students and their experience. You can start building courses quickly by simply dragging and dropping content into them. You can even create content right in the system, like adding images or videos with just a few clicks. The responsive interface looks great on a laptop, tablet, or smartphone, and it works on any device. Brightspace also lets you teach the way you want. Built-in communication tools let you create a connected learning experience with homepage news feeds, online discussions, and web conferencing. And whether you're fully online, blended, or flipped, Brightspace lets you use lots of different pedagogical approaches, like competency-based education and gamification. It helps you work smarter too. Built-in analytics lets you quickly check on how everyone in the class is doing. You can also dive deeper to review individual performance in more detail. And with smart rules and smart tools, you can automatically trigger activities based upon what a student does or doesn't do to personalize their learning experience. Easy, flexible, smart. That's Brightspace.
Good afternoon. My name is Vikas Pota, and I'm the founder of T4. Today, I am really pleased to be coming to you a few days before World Education Week takes place. Actually, we have our plenary starting on Sunday, and 100 schools and 20 other high-impact organizations are going to be hosting their own virtual showcases and school celebrations next week as a way of sharing their experience, their journey of school improvement, and of expertise. And because these schools are chosen from all over the world, and we know how contextual education is, I think I'm sure that there is something to learn from each one of these 100 schools and 20 other organizations. So if you wish to register for World Education Week, don't forget that you can do so on our website, which is worldeduweek.org. This morning, I let it be known that over 60,000 tickets have been booked for these 120 events so far, making this just the most humongous celebration of school-based expertise from the grassroots to come and influence and shape how other schools think, behave, and try to replicate your journey to excellence. And so, friends, World Education Week starts on Sunday with the plenary, and we have some really exciting news to give at the plenary on Sunday, which I would love for you not to miss. And so please try and join us. Now, if you're watching this on Facebook, you should be aware that you need to go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give permission so that we can see your name when you comment. And so we already have some people watching. We have Shams Zoha from Bangladesh, who is a T4 country ambassador. We have my friend Akil Dalla from Tanzania and the UK, who's also watching. And today's topic actually is very relevant, and I'm sure, Akil, you will enjoy listening to the perspective of our guest. We've been COVID has come, and I should mention that today my 15-year-old daughter actually got her first COVID jab in school in England. And the real question that we have to ask ourselves is around vaccine equity and what is happening around the world. And I was sent on WhatsApp this image about where the vaccines have come. And on the continent of Africa, you could see that actually they haven't had much. And so COVID has ravaged equal parts everywhere in the world, but we have to make sure that vaccines get everywhere, and so that we can continue to some degree with the sense of normalcy in our lives. So today I am pleased that I have a very old and dear friend of mine who was the Minister for Technical Education in Rwanda join me, and he is Albert. Albert, hi, welcome.
Hi, Vikas, good to see you. It has been some time.
Yeah, it's been we've had some great times together, and what you did when you were a minister was just incredible. And you've gone on now to become the executive secretary, which is the CEO of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, which is abbreviated to ADEA. Albert, would it be helpful for our viewers just to tell them what ADEA does?
Thank you, Vikas. Let me first thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to a wonderful work that you're doing that I appreciate it very much. ADEA has been started sometimes 33 years ago under the World Bank as a mechanism to facilitate donor intervention in Africa's education. And then it moved to UNESCO later under what is known as the IIEP to facilitate policy dialogue among ministers of education in the continent, until the ministers decided ADEA should actually be hosted somewhere in Africa. And the choice was made for ADEA to be hosted by the African Development Bank. And this is where we are now located, here in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast. So ADEA focused on two major pillars. One is to facilitate policy dialogue, particularly focusing on education and training in Africa. And to do so, ADEA has what is known as inter-country quality nodes. Those are platforms that are hosted by a number of our member countries that facilitate research, case studies to mobilize knowledge, and that the knowledge is being used to feed the policy dialogue. And we have different forms of those policy dialogue. One of them is known as the High-Level Policy Dialogue Forum, and the other one is a triennial. As I mentioned, this one is going to take place, the next one next year in September. The second pillar is what we call advisory and execution support services. As you can imagine, there are good recommendations coming out of the high-level policy dialogue. The question is, what happened next once you have those recommendations? How do you make sure that countries are able to implement some of these recommendations that feed to their purposes? So this is where ADEA comes in to support country. Examples include capacity development that we conduct together with other partners, and more importantly also the issue of data. And I'm sure I will come back to that again. Data use and management is so critical, particularly in education. And as you mentioned about COVID-19, it's so important to strengthen the capacities of ministries to be able to collect and use data in the different aspects, policy and planning. Thank you.
Albert, I want to ask you about, even pre-COVID, education was pretty challenged in many parts of Africa, actually. We have statistics such as number of out of school girls and such actually pretty significant substantive issues. And then COVID has come along. Can you tell us in terms of what has happened across Africa? And I know that it's a generalization that I'm speaking about, because Africa is many 50-odd countries, and it's very difficult to generalize like that. But can you give us an understanding of what COVID has done to education across Africa?
That's a very good question indeed. As you pointed out, just before COVID, there have been a number of studies clearly showing that education system was actually lagging behind as per the target set in the SDGs. And countries have tried to come together to see how we can accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. Unfortunately, COVID came up, and it was really a huge disruption of education, because what happened then was actually the closure, in most countries, the closures of schools. So that in itself came in as surprise, because there were no plan on how country was actually dealing with remote education. So that really on itself was a big issue. Now, through the Global Partnership for Education, ADEA is right now running what is known as the Knowledge Innovation Exchange Observatory on COVID-19 in Africa education system. So far, we've conducted 4 research together with our partners. And those research have covered issues, for example, education financing. Finance has been really one of the critical issues. 2, we also covered the teacher and learners' well-being. Again, with COVID, we have seen the importance of really having public health and making sure there's safety engaged in this regard. We have just released a third report on schools reopening, and the fourth one is coming on learning assessment. Now, back to your question, what are we learning from those research? First, there's still fear, and particularly for teachers and learners, about the whole things about COVID. You can sound really the fears around. Number two, the infrastructure that was not even enough at that time has now become a serious issue in many countries because we now understand the importance of distancing. The distancing and the distanciation is so important to avoid learners to get affected with COVID-19. Number three, in most of these countries, because COVID came as a pandemic, they were not prepared for it, there was no budget to cater for the needs to adapt the situation. So financing is one of the critical issues. Most countries are looking for alternative financing mechanisms to support it. Of course, as I mentioned, when the school closed, the critical issue was now to deal with remote learning. This is where the issues of technology, teacher preparedness, and of course the well-being, that was so important. I'm sure you have seen a number of reports that came out showing some abuses, including early pregnancies that a number of countries are dealing with around this time. Of course, technology itself, most countries did not have a plan to apply technology for remote learning. So they used different systems. But again, teachers were not prepared, learners were not prepared, and most importantly, in many of these places, the technology was and is not yet available. So you can see one of the critical issues that COVID is bringing up is a digital divide that we are seeing happening. So those are really some of the few issues that we are experiencing in education in Africa.
Yeah, so Albert, just last week, actually, my organization T4, in partnership with the EdTech Hub in London, actually published the world's largest survey of the use of tech by teachers, which was based upon a survey that we did in 165 countries. And in there, some of the things that you have said have come out. But the question that I really have, and I appreciate the fact that you may not want to get asked this, and you may not want to answer this question, who is responsible for this, for the lack of action and the preparedness in education systems?
I think, to be honest with you, no, I definitely answer. I think we are all responsible. I don't want to point any particular person. We are all responsible. First of all, we did not build the system to cope with pandemic issues of this kind. So therefore, our system was not built with sufficient resiliencies that could help them actually cope with such a situation. So that's really one fact. Of course, our policymakers are playing a key role in this regard, but they cannot do everything alone. I think we as a citizen, as a global citizen, we have a critical role to play to actually contribute as much as possible.
But isn't, Albert, I get that, but isn't education a public subject? In terms of what I mean is a public sector subject, regulated, run schools. I mean, so doesn't the lion's share of the preparedness issue go back to exactly what ADEA is set up for, which is capacity building?
Yes, that's indeed is very important. No, that's why I said we have shared responsibilities indeed. The education sector is really a public good. We all agree on that. And policymakers have a critical role to play in this regard. But in the same time, as parents, we definitely need to also contribute as much as we can. We cannot feel like government itself can do everything. I think we have our responsibilities, including organizations like ours, to make sure that there's a clear understanding and support. One of the examples that I want to share with you to show what is happening, just before this particular interview, I just came out of a forum where 6 African countries came together to share experiences and perspectives around the school reopening. So I had Angola, Rwanda, Senegal, the DRC, Kenya, Nigeria, Gambia, and so on. So when you hear what these colleagues are sharing in this, you could tell that unless we built a stakeholders engagement where government, of course, play its part, but also other equally important stakeholders come in. We're not going to be able to build a strong system that can actually build in resiliencies to cope with any new COVID-like pandemic that may come up. So I hear what you're saying. Indeed, policymakers have a role to play, but we also need to understand we are also responsible as parents, as stakeholders, to support the policy-making process, and of course, implementation.
And you talked about this knowledge exchange, the KICS observatory, right? That
yes.
you have you're part of and you're running. What have you got coming up in the future for that observatory that actually helps people understand as to how we run education systems?
That's a very good point. Indeed, what we are doing, of course, we are working within a consortium. So we have a partner who conducts research. The organization known as Africa Population and Health Research Center, based in Kenya. And we also work with another organization of the African Union, known as CFA, is actually an institution responsible to promote gender in education. So through this consortium, the HRC support the research, and the research we're talking about is more emerging research. And we need research, by the way, because research can actually feed policies. We need to make policy demand-driven. So we definitely need this research. That's number one. Number two, and we need to continue this kind of research. Number two, in addition to research, they are also conducting case studies, because that's how you can build a peer learning. And case studies can cover from issues of learners' well-being, issues of financing, issues of learning assessment. All these are actually coming up to feed a peer learning and knowledge exchange. So this is something we should also continue. Where we are still lagging behind, which is important, because it's one thing to produce these reports, it's another thing to disseminate, is really the capacity for country to mobilize for the uptake. Because all these policies are meant to contribute to discussions that will happen at the country level to inform policy and practices. So unless we are able to mobilize countries to pick some of these good practices and actually translate this into actions, observatory will probably not really sustain over time. So this is where we are pushing for knowledge mobilization, bringing countries on board, and we are using what we know and is known as the local education groups, because that's really partnership needs to happen at the country level as well. So we believe this is the way to go, but we also need to keep measuring the uptake to make sure that these things actually have a meaning in terms of informing policies and practices.
Albert, we're coming to our time in terms of to conclude this interview, but can I ask you a question in terms of the people that support the T4 platform are teachers from around the world. We're building a community of teachers in schools. You, as the executive secretary of ADEA, which is a platform to bring together ministries of education on a knowledge sharing kind of basis. What encouragement can you provide teachers in schools at this time? At this time of these challenging times that we live in?
That's a very interesting question. Number one, despite the importance that we are attaching to technology, because some people may actually be misled by thinking that technology will replace teachers. There's no way that can happen. We're definitely going to need teachers, no matter how much you're going to apply technology. So I think during this time of COVID, we have seen the importance of empowering teachers. This is number one. Everyone has really seen that we need to invest, we need to incentivize teachers because they are playing a central role in the delivering quality education. So that's really very important. Number two, technology is useful as long as teachers can master it, can better use it for education purposes. And a number of countries have understood that and are investing in teacher professional development. So I believe that, and this is something that is coming out of our report, we definitely need to find ways of continuing motivating teachers because they're really central. Whenever we talk about quality, it starts from a teacher. A well-trained teacher and motivated make a big difference.
And so you know,
that's really what.
Yeah, and so you know that next week we host World Education Week, which is this collection of schools from around the world that share best practice and expertise as a way of sharing and democratizing information as to how they've undertaken their journey of improvement. Do you have any encouragement for the 100 schools that have been chosen from around the world and for other schools around Africa to actually participate? Could you say a word or two about that?
One of the things that I want to say, there are a couple of things that I can say, but more importantly, I like the way you have transited from teacher to schools. That's really fantastic. You used to focus on teachers, but teachers are relevant in a school. School is the central place where we can only build the future of our children, particularly around this time where the world is faced by all kinds of challenges. We are talking about COVID. We are seeing also more and more climate change. We are seeing security matters issues around it. So the school is a single place where we need to build values, starting from our children, so that we prepare them to confront this changing world that is coming up. And the difference will always lie in the quality education that we can provide to these young people, because we are preparing the leaders of tomorrow. And the leader of tomorrow has to be transformational. I don't see any other place where we can do this instead of starting from the school.
Albert, you're very kind, and thank you so much for your time today. I know that I'm a huge fan and have been a huge fan of your work. And please know that this platform is available to you at any time you need it. Please know that you have friends all over the world in schools and systems that want to and wish you the very best. So thank you so much. We look forward to the next opportunity.
Sure. Much appreciated. Thank you.